Well, I really wish I had the gift of interpretation to tell you in English all that's been said, but I guess that's why Google is your friend. You can just translate. How about that? Well, it's a Saturday morning and sunrise is here. The first issue we're looking at, infectious diseases surveillance. Now, following the emergence of a new COVID-19 variant, Omicron, which is diagnosed in South Africa about that, because that's not the first place, it really was seen about a week ago. Countries like Canada, US and all, they have banned travel from Nigeria, from Egypt and Malawi and all, over the fears of the spread of this new Omicron coronavirus variant. Now, while the new COVID-19 variant has been found in 23 countries across the world, that's according to the World Health Organization, what can be done to tame further spread of the virus? There are those who even go as far back as 1963, because remember there is a movie titled The Omicron Variant in 1963. Gosh. Anyway, to have this conversation this morning, please welcome with me Dr. Olushola Shukefun, who is a geneticist. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, and we also have with us in this conversation Dr. Oyeladun Okunromade, who is Deputy Director of Surveillance with the NCDC. We'll get to her shortly. So let's begin with you, Dr. Shukefun. The Omicron variant. Everyone is talking about it now, and still. It's unfortunate that every time we have to talk about these things, there's always some angle to it or not. But the way I would want to begin with you on this conversation is like every mutation gets worse. The noise, so to speak, about the Delta variant was that it is worse than the previous one. And you told us the last time that there are thousands of other variants of this coronavirus disease, but each time we hear about one that seems to take the cake, it gets worse. The Delta variant was worse than the previous, but even now the Omicron variant is said to be even worse than the Delta variant. Exactly what are we dealing with here?
Well, we shouldn't be surprised. We will be getting many more, as time goes on. Viruses have a way of changing across time to increase their chances of being transmitted between the hosts, and then also eluding the immune system of the host, eluding the detection systems that we have. So you may find that at some point in time, the current RT-PCR will not be good enough to amplify and detect the virus based on mutation. So these are things that are normal, phenomenon in science as it concerns viruses. It doesn't mean that with every mutation it gets bad. Why this is significant is that there are about 30 variations on the spike protein. And you know that for the mRNA virus, the spike protein is the source through which your immune system is primed, and then the vaccine is also made. So if there are 30 variations on the spike protein, then there are issues with the mRNA mRNA vaccines. So this is significant. We also have several other variants that are not significant. Note that what they call the Omicron is just the B11529, and the essentials are that it is becoming very rampant in terms of its occurrence. So it's also important to begin to ask questions about this phenomenon. So it's not anything new in science. You still have many more, and we had better be prepared for it.
Well, I understand that Dr. Okunromade has just joined us. Thanks for joining us this morning, Doctor. You may need to unmute your microphone so we can hear you better. But let's talk very quickly. We have a wide spectrum of conversation this morning, Doctor, but let's begin with this Omicron variant of COVID-19, the coronavirus disease that we've been dealing with for a while. The natural question to ask is, what do we know about it in order to deal with it? The most we hear is that people should take the vaccines and still continue to observe the NPIs. But the question a number of people are asking, judging from what Dr. Shukefon has told us now, is if the Omicron variant is now smart enough to try to avoid the human protection system, what good then can the vaccines be? Mute your mic if you can. Unmute your mic if you can, so we can hear you. But if you have unmuted, I'm sure we'll resolve it and we'll get back to you shortly. Well, so Dr. Shukefon, let me take that question to you. There are those who are wondering if what you are saying is valid indeed, that the Omicron variant has become smart enough to avoid protection system in the human body, the immune system in the human body, the mRNA, process that you talked about.
Yes.
Of what good then is the virus? Is the vaccine?
The vaccine, it will not become completely ineffective. Of course, it will drop in terms of element of being effective and all that. That's expected. And what I expect that we will see in the next 100 days is that the vaccine manufacturing companies will also begin to use the Omicron variant as their template, so that it becomes more all-encompassing, more like, you see, with vaccines, you also have to be careful about immunogenicity, for instance. That's the reason why if you bring in vaccines from France, for instance, it may not be effective for variants that you find in Nigeria, even for other diseases like polio and all that. So you must take this new variant and then use it as a template for making the current vaccines. That will take about 100 days. But in terms of, increase in mortality and all, we have not seen that empirically. Well, the Omicron.
Yeah, we also heard that.
Yes, so it doesn't mean that it is more fatal. It just tells us that it's adapting and is learning its way through human population and all that. So, there's really...
With the transmissibility
yes.
easier now,
yes.
It only makes the human body more vulnerable.
Yes, right? But it does not essentially increase mortality. You don't have more persons dying. Of course, there are higher incidences of reinfection even after getting the 2 shots.
Okay.
And that's to be expected. The thing has changed from the template from which the vaccines were made in the first place.
Okay, is that the reason then you see the justification for the federal government through the Presidential Steering Committee approving the administration of booster doses for those who have completed 2 doses of the...
That's also being done in the UK. That's being done in Italy, for instance.
Okay.
Yeah, people are being asked to go for booster doses just to shore up their immunity, because of the new variant.
But how significant do you see that being?
Significance in terms of...
in terms of protection of the people. You said the other time that this transmissibility is easier now.
Yes.
But with the booster doses being taken now, what makes it...
Well, there's with the booster doses, what you have is a showing up of your immunity. That to a large extent.
So it will increase the chances above 70-something% that you said earlier?
Well, it depends. It depends. There are several things that are just conjectures and they are still unclear. Science doesn't deal with things that are unclear. We need to look at it in the laboratories and then do large cohort studies, check how far the thing is moving and all that before we begin to make clear conclusions. In sciences, we don't just make conclusions without experiment.
I don't know if it is safe to say it seems that this coronavirus disease is trying to outsmart science. I don't want to say that yet. But
what will happen at the end of the day is it's going to be like the common flu. It has come to stay.
Come to stay,
yes,
okay.
And we just have to live with it.
Well, Dr. Okoromade, what else do we need to know or hear about this Omicron? Why do I call it Omicron? Omicron variant that we're dealing with, many people are still at a loss. And what do we know? Or what do we need to know?
Okay, so Omicron is a new variant of the COVID-19 virus, and just like the nature of viruses generally, their nature, virus mutates, meaning change in the protein nature, and we've experienced the changes before in COVID-19 when there was a widespread of Delta variant. Now, the variant of concern that is being postulated that will worsen this pandemic that we're dealing with is Omicron variants. In terms of what we know, there is a lot of research and data ongoing to determine if it's more transmissible than other variants and if there is more increased mortality with this. Is still not clear. We still don't have a lot of information as regards that, but it's been postulated that there is an increased transmissibility with Omicron variant as compared to other, and likely possibility of causing severe illness as well as severe hospitality in terms of complications, but there is limited information as regards that. And in terms of the symptoms, how it differs from the other variants is still not clear. They appear to behave in a similar way in terms of symptoms, and the information available is that there is likely possibility of this dominant variant causing severe disease and more death as compared to others.
But incidentally, it so happens that even from the WHO, we haven't heard of any mortality as a result of this Omicron variant specifically. Is that any comfort?
So there's not been any specific death or mortality being reported due to Omicron, even from the cases that we've reported in Nigeria. So I would say there is no conflict globally and at the regional level, and even in Nigeria, we're still gathering more information. We're still gathering more data concerning that, and there is a lot of research ongoing to determine how this variant differs from others. But as it is, WHO has declared it as a variant of concern, looking at the way it's spreading across different regions and globally.
All right, Dr. Shokefun, one of the things that has been a consequence of this particular dominant variant, to use Dr. Okunomade's term, is that a number of countries have begun to take precautions, banning flights from so-so place and so-so place due to all of that. And there are those, including, I think, the United Nations and the World Health Organization, have raised concerns about that. Every nation wants to protect their own, but at the same time, we are supposed to all gather together as one to fight this disease. From your own experience, and because while you study the science, you sometimes have to also look at you can't take your eyes away from the politics of the science. So in terms of that, what are your thoughts on that precaution being taken by those countries, and how would you expect Nigeria to react, for instance?
Well, the byline remains the same. Nobody is safe until everybody is safe. Typically, so, I mean, they might not be too far from the ideal thing to do. It's usually better to act fast, just in case, because of the uncertainties that we are seeing and all that. Politically, I just think that we have a duty of also making sure that we are able to manufacture our own vaccines and then get the shots across as fast as possible. That's very, very, very key and important. To be dependent on shots coming from India and all that may not be helpful. You have 60% of the American population already with the second jab, and, to a large extent, they have a lower risk of being affected badly. So we must also increase our efforts at getting the jab across to everybody, typically, and then making it within Nigeria. That's important. Of course, the world cannot continue to act aloof. This is Europe, this is Africa. At some point in time, whatever affects Africa will also get to Europe and then Asia and all that. This is one critical situation that has shown that there are no Muslims, no Christians, no Indians, no Americans. The world is just full of human beings. And we have thought that when the thing gets to Africa, the impact would have been so huge that, would have been having people dying on the streets and all that. That has not been the case. So typically, no segment or section of the world can continue to say that what is happening at the other end of the world does not matter to it anymore. That's what we are being taught here. We must also enhance capacity in Nigeria. Research, virology, I've said that, bioinformatics, I've said it, vaccinology, and because there are also a huge amount of viruses that you do not know what impact they will have when they get to man. And we must be prepared. This has happened. It can happen again at any point in time. So,
it's perhaps it's a little gratifying, from what you have said, to imagine that at least we don't have another case of the Black Death on our hands, where we were told that 1/3 of the population of the world died as a result of the Black Death of the 13th century. Yes. But at the same time, what you have said is quite critical about us producing vaccines locally. And one is just wondering, not just for COVID-19, but for any other and every other infectious diseases, that we had the capacity once before. We produced yellow fever vaccines in this country at some point in our lives. And it would seem like the challenge we had was not just starting, but sustaining that trend. How do you suggest that we take this on? We understand that the CBN and a number of other institutions are putting aside funds for research, and there is a global partnership working at local production of vaccines in Africa. The DG of the World Trade Organization has spoken about it. AFDB president has spoken about it, and all of that. So in terms of capacity, we have it. What are we lacking?
I don't think the capacity, yes, we have it, but we need more than that. You need the funds, you need the training, you need the electricity. You imagine that in a vaccinology lab, we cannot afford to have electricity outage.
Is it that we can't have that because there are segments of communities in this country that haven't had a power blink for more than 10 years? There is an example of Bonny Island, for instance, which if the light is going to go up maybe for just a minute or two for them to service a thing or two, and then the light is back. So we have had such segments in this country. We do have them. We still have them. And that's not, talking not just about Nigeria, but across Africa.
Well, can we have electricity 24/7? Yes, we can. I was in India for about a month, and I imagine traveling to the inner parts of India. There's electricity 24/7. The population in India is much more than ours, and they are able to do it. What I don't understand is why we are not seemingly getting that. And I'm not in government, so I wouldn't. And I don't believe in the Nigerian factor. If it can be done elsewhere in the world, I think we can also do it. There is nothing like starting from ground zero. No, there are models of everything we want to do. We just need to adapt, and bring it to fit our sociocultural milieu, for instance, and then make it work.
Okay.
Yeah, there are universities where light goes over at about 4 p.m. You can imagine that.
Okay.
Dr.
Bumade, the one issue that comes to me about this for you is the area of surveillance, which is your own specialty and your primary call, so to speak, at the NCDC. So in terms of disease surveillance, not just of COVID-19 or the Omicron variant, but of every other, especially those that are peculiar to us here in Nigeria, there's Lassa fever, cholera, and other infectious diseases such as that. So Ebola, no. So in terms of surveillance of these diseases, one question that still bugs my mind is some of these, we know they will come. Lassa fever, it seems to be at certain periods of our lives in every year. Cholera, Ebola, and these other things. So, in terms of surveillance, where are we? And in terms of communicating with people to take necessary precaution, what are we lacking?
As regards surveillance in Nigeria, we all know that disease surveillance is continuous scrutiny and the watchfulness on occurrence of diseases, be it Lassa, measles, cholera, generally priority diseases as highlighted by integrated disease surveillance response strategy in Nigeria, which is applicable also at the household level. So it is an ongoing process. It is through the process of that surveillance that we're able to detect Omicron variants in the country. Because there's been a lot of effort and a lot of attention on COVID-19, does not mean the other surveillance activities are lacking behind. We keep enhancing and keep strengthening the other surveillance activities because this is the core basis of our work, and the data that we generate is what inform policies, what inform other programs, and also give us idea of the potential outbreak response within the country. So as regards Lassa fever, cholera, measles, and even viral hemorrhagic fever, we have different disease technical working group, and we have expertise working across these disease technical working groups. They meet every week to review data that come in weekly and use this data to inform the interventions and the activities and the response that take place within the NCDC. And mostly these data are generated from the community, basically from the health facilities at the community level to different levels of government. Currently, there's an ongoing outbreak of cholera, as well as we're managing COVID-19 response. And so far, we've recorded over 70,000 cases of suspected cholera across the country, being reported in about 27 states out of the 36 states in the country. And we have a rapid response team across these states to work with the state surveillance team as well as the state response team to ensure that they respond promptly to this outbreak and as much as possible reduce death within the community. And part of the response strategy across this CWG, it's also risk communication. We keep enforcing communication to the public in terms of their hygiene practices, looking at the sanitation, and we keep giving recommendations as much as possible. So as much as we're intensifying effort on the COVID-19, we're intensifying response efforts across other priority diseases as well in country, and we're working closely with the risk communication team who are also working with the media team to ensure that the public are well informed on the hygiene practices and the preventive measures that they need to take to ensure that we fight against all this outbreak and ensure that we all take collective responsibility to prevent diseases in the country. Thank you.
Well, in terms of that prevention, I'm wondering if you can speak to peculiarities in certain parts of the country. For instance, there was a recent research carried out among what we call the nomadic population in Kano, and I'm pretty sure that there are several other special cases, if I can use that term like that, all across Nigeria. There are the riverine areas in the south part of the country, and several other pockets of communities all over the nation like that. So in terms of these peculiarities, what are the things we need to know? What are the things we should be communicating to the people? Now I'm asking this question, madam, on the account of the fact that a good number of people are going to be traveling to different parts of the country at this time of the year. So what are the things people need to be aware of for those who are living maybe Lagos or Oyo or Enugu to go to Kano to go meet their family and relatives in the hinterlands, and those who are coming from the hinterlands to the cities? What are the things people need to be aware of and to take necessary precaution of?
Okay, so as it relates to cholera in the country, we all know that basic hygiene are very important, especially areas in nomadic, as you mentioned, as much as possible. Part of our risk communication messages to them is to avoid open defecation in the communities, and as much as possible after defecation, they should wash their hands with soap and running water. If running water is not available, as much as possible, ensure that you get water, somebody pouring you water while washing your hand, and make use of latrine as or bury your poop. So in the process of engaging the communities, we demonstrate some of these activities to them. And in areas where there is lack of potable drinking water, we engage the community leaders, we engage the government within that community to ensure availability of safe water within the community. And as much as possible, we tend to would inform the community to ensure that as much as possible they boil their available water available to them and save before drinking. And also we respond with what we call the wash team. These are the people working with the water environment to ensure that they make available potable water to people within this community. And also in terms of the food, they should ensure that they cook their food. If there is any leftover, it should be well covered. And if there is any need to eat again, they need to reheat that food so that they would eat warm food and not cold food. Avoid raw food as much as possible. And for fruit and vegetables, they should wash with clean water. Learn to wash themselves within the community. And there's some communities that use the same water for bathing, for washing, and the same for cooking. So we tend to discourage this activity by ensuring that they have water separate for different hygiene practices within the community, and ensure that they disinfect the water and disinfect their latrine as much as possible. We'll teach them how to use the chlorine bleach, using 1 part of chlorine to 9 parts of water, using the ratio of 1 to 10. So these are the specific preventive measures we tell them. But basically, avoid eating cold food. If there's any leftover food, should be reheat and eat the warm food. use the latrine as much as possible, or use the bury the pool instead of using the open defecation, and basic hygiene, which is also applicable to COVID-19, applicable to all form of infectious disease, is hand hygiene. Should wash hands appropriately with soap and clean water as much as possible following every activity. Avoid eating raw food, and if they must eat raw food, ensure especially fruits and vegetables is properly washed. Thank you.
We have to have the water for that to happen, Dr. Okuromade. You also know, of course, that this is something that many of these rural communities that we've talked about do lack. Dr. Shukafo, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, potable water is very critical. I mean, cholera, typhoid fever are typically diseases of a general breakdown of the hygiene system. So once the hygiene system is in place, and you have clean potable water, of course you are not likely to find this. So making water available is very, very key in this environment.
But we know how challenging that is in many of these communities that we're talking about. We have gone to some of these communities to do reports where people are literally scraping, not just bailing water, scraping water from the ground to eat, to use, to drink. Some will have to wait for days, some maybe just a few hours for the water to settle before they can drink and all of that. And this is contrary to what we had in time past, where we had sanitation officer, and I keep talking about this. Many people continue to talk about the breakdown of the local government system. So where the sanitation officers went from house to house, not just in the communities, they went from house to house to ensure that the areas were sanitized and clean enough, hygienic enough for people to live, work, eat, cook, and all of those things. Is there any, I mean, you may want to share some of your experiences growing up from what you saw in those days. Is there any going back to those?
Well, it's just a failure of the political class. That's the way I say it. There's no reason why water shouldn't be everywhere at this point in time. The topography and the water table around these areas are not very, very difficult. And deep water wells, can do it. In Libya, where you have 40-45% of the place being desert, people have water. People have clean water. So, I mean, there's no reason why these locations and localities should not have water. It's a failure of the political class. And, things have changed so badly that we cannot do what we were doing before. I mean, I remember living in Sule. Periodically, we would spray the open gutters with kerosene, to make sure that we kill the mosquito larvae that are there. Who dares to waste kerosene like we were doing, at this time? So we must begin to ask questions from the political class to make sure that at least the basics of life, the modicum things that we need, are in place. Shelter, electricity, potable water, which is critical. Because if you fail to spend on that, then you have to pay in terms of the health consequences. More persons take ill. You have epidemics which are critically not a common thing in the developed world. And these are not very expensive solutions. I mean, a borehole typically costs maybe about $500,000 and all that. The problem is to power it, because electricity is not typically available. So 20, 30, 40 boreholes.
Are you asking for the lawmakers to donate some of these as their constituency projects?
I think so. I think so. Instead of buying a car that is 45-50 million, why don't you spend 20 million in putting boreholes almost everywhere, and then you make sure that it is powered? At least water will be available. And then the epidemics that you see in terms of cholera, typhoid fever and all that, which are empirically diseases of the general breakdown of the hygiene system, will cease to.
Okay, just one last one, Dr. Okuromade. What would you be asking from people what support would you be asking that people should give to the NCDC in order to keep us safe?
As it relates to cholera, we all know that without proper water, sanitation, hygiene, will continue to remain at risk of cholera deaths and cholera cases. So we want to use this opportunity to advocate to state government to ensure that they prioritize actions to ensure availability of safe water within the state. We want to appeal to the local governments to ensure that safe water are made available within the communities and basic sanitation. But when it comes to hygiene practices, we'll continue to advocate to all Nigerians to ensure that they keep the environment safe, clean, use water that is boiled, and store your food safely. Ensure that you eat well-cooked food, and ensure your environment is safe. Avoid open defecation and wash your hands regularly with soap and running water. And we keep engaging the media to reinforce the same messages across to all Nigerians. It is our collective responsibility. And for COVID-19, ensure that we achieve, for us to win this war.
Is there any conversation? My apologies. Can you hear me, madam? Yeah, just a quick one. You talked about water, running water over and over again. Is there any conversation between the NCDC and the authorities who can ensure that the running water is available, in the rural communities especially?
Yeah, so we keep advocating for this to state governments to ensure that they prioritize actions for availability of safe water. There's been, especially communities where we go there to respond to cholera outbreaks. We engage with the state government, we engage with the community leaders to ensure that safe water, basic sanitations are made available to the community, and we've recorded a lot of successes with this, and we want to use this medium to still keep advocating to the government to continue to prioritize this across different communities in Nigeria, and also to also ensure that our media as a partner keep re-emphasizing this so that the necessary basic water, as little as safe water, is made available to the community to avoid these waterborne diseases as much as possible.
All right, thank you.
Little by little, with all our collective efforts, we'll win the war against this. Cholera is preventable, cholera is treatable, but we'll continue to work with everyone involved to ensure that there is access to clean water to all the necessary community in the country.
All right, well, Dr. Shekefun, just one last one. What would you be telling the medical environment in these states in particular? They have quite a lot of work on their hands, their limitations notwithstanding.
There are modular solutions for making water available. I think they should just go for this. You don't have to do a gigantic project that is like 20, 30, 40 billion. I mean, small, portable, solar-powered water units. That will cost you about maybe 8-9 million, and periodically you can pump water, people have access to it, at least for starters. Then you can think of the next phase, which is piping the water to the homes and all that. I mean, but without water, you can hardly have hygiene.
Oh dear.
These are two things
that consequently means that infectious diseases are uncontrollable unless we have this basic hygiene that you talked about. Wow. I guess that's an agenda set for government right there. We have to thank you very much for your time this morning. Dr. Lushola Shekefun is a geneticist. Thank you so much for your time. And we've also had Dr. Oyeladun Okoromade, who is the Deputy Director of Surveillance of the NCDC. Thank you so much for your time this morning. So Sunrise continues. Yeah, Sunrise continues in a moment. Please stay with us.